Hello, this is Pastor Terry Goodman, and I want to welcome you to the Wesleyan Connection. This podcast is primarily for the clergy and laity of the Holston Annual Conference. Join with me now as I take a look around the Connection and share some of the things happening in the churches of our annual conference. Good morning. I want to welcome you to this edition of the Wesleyan Connection. This is Pastor Terry Goodman, and I'm glad that you're out there listening to these podcasts. This podcast today goes back to the middle of February. I'm a member of the conference Discipleship Team, and they've been kind enough to let me record the meetings when we get together a couple of times each year. And the first meeting had a lot of things that were very specific and tied into certain things, a nice time frame, so to speak. This meeting, we were a little bit more scattered in the way that we talked about things, and a lot of the things we talked about were very short, not really long enough to even put on a podcast. But there were a couple of the reports that I did want to share. They may seem a little out of date, especially when they're talking about things of annual conference, and annual conference is just next week as you listen to this podcast. But I wanted to go ahead and share them as well. The first one I'm going to share is from the Discipleship Team, the mission report that Tom Hancock made, talking about missions within our annual conference. And we're just going to sort of jump right into the middle of it. Tom's just going to start talking, and he'll work his way through the report. I hope you learn something from what Tom has to say.
Well, missions is continuing to be busy. I hope that you've all gotten information on the hands-on project early on and starting to think about that in your local churches and throughout your districts. I think the emphasis are the kits and buckets remain the same this year as they were last year. We're awaiting a decision on what the mission offering is going to be this year, and as soon as we know, we'll let everybody else know. A couple different ideas out there and leanings, but still waiting on that decision. We've got the second round of Children with Poverty grants to be awarded probably by the end of this month. It's gone very well. We've been able to do a lot of good ministry through that, and reaching out into the communities and meeting the needs of local churches and bridging that gap between the church and the community. So we continue in that effort. This is the second round. We've got two more following that. So as well, I'd encourage you to get your mission people aware that those are available in your local churches and take advantage of that opportunity. We continue to look for ways to communicate and connect local churches to mission. We have yet to get on board or on track with regional or district type mission fairs, but that's in the plans and in the works, and Jerry Russell's heading that effort out. But there is a mission fair at First Broad Street, February 24th and 26th, and if you've got folks that are interested in missions, it's a great opportunity to connect with a variety of things that are going on throughout the conference and even throughout the denomination to a certain degree. Fred and Libby Deering will be there to talk about South Sudan, and John Redmond will be there to talk about the English-speaking church in Prague and the mission there at the Czech Republic. Speaking of that, you can meet him there at the mission fair. He's also going to be at annual conference and do our mission dinner, and I hope that there'll be an opportunity as our discussion progresses today for him to speak at annual conference as well, to help people to be aware that this is a mission emphasis that started in Johnson City, and the missions ministry team expanded that to be a conference-wide emphasis and effort. Mike, Danny, Hal, and I just returned from South Sudan a few weeks ago. We continue to navigate that situation now that those folks are in refugee camps in the Rhino refugee camp and others in northern Uganda. We came away encouraged to some degree and also a little overwhelmed with the continuing needs that are there. The biggest need is water, and we're developing plans to move forward to get wells dug, working with the local community, the government, and also the people that are in charge of the camp. So we're hopeful that that'll be the first need that we can meet. We continue to also explore opportunities and challenges with pastoral support, keeping our churches going, not only new churches in northern Uganda in the camp, but also the churches that are there still in South Sudan. And many of those are still operating. And same with the schools and education, trying to figure out scholarships and ways to get the kids from Grace Home into a situation where they can bloom and blossom. Right now, in the refugee camps, schools are about a 1 to 200 ratio, one teacher to about 200 kids. So we'd like to continue to explore options to take them to schools outside the camp, and then also supplement that with tutoring opportunities, people and teams that can come in. But all that's a big process. We meet during the mission fair at the beginning of that as an advisory team to plot a way forward. And as soon as we have information on how churches can connect with that effort, both in northern Uganda and continuing in South Sudan, we'll let you know. Our next big meeting, as far as the team goes, is scheduled for late April, and we'll continue to move forward with these areas and see where God's going to lead us.
Can you say again when the mission fair is, what the dates?
February 24th through the 26th. So that's the evening of the 24th. As soon as I get the pamphlet for that, I'll put it out on Facebook. I can pass it along.
I'm curious, how's the political system, how is Uganda responding to the refugees that are pouring in?
Well, I mean, I think that, it certainly gave me a new perspective on being a refugee. You're in a foreign land, and because of the governmental systems and so forth, and all that comes with that, it's difficult. They're really not, there's certain things in place and laws and regulations and unspoken rules that prevent them from being treated equally. One instance, we were headed towards Kiboko to research and do a recon on where we might get the orphans into the school. And we were stopped along the way because, if you have out-of-state plates, right, you're going to get stopped. And we had out-of-state plates. We had out-of-country plates on the Land Rover, and as they went through the paperwork and everything, it was obvious that we were being treated differently than if we were Ugandan and helping in Uganda. That's not to say that the government is totally resistant. They do what they can. But there are those dynamics and those things that kind of that undercurrent that we have to navigate and work around. We met some very sympathetic people, and then we hit some roadblocks along the way. So we ended up having to pay a little fine on our little adventure to Kiboko. All said and done, it wasn't too bad.
I like how you started that off. You got an experience of how it feels to be a refugee. I wouldn't recommend everybody to have that experience under those situations, but I think that has a way of broadening your perspective as far as the world is concerned, politics and whatever.
Well, it's just limited opportunities, and you see the subtle injustices. It's difficult for them to gain employment because of the Ugandan laws that are saying you have to hire 80% Ugandans, and so that doesn't leave much room. You go into the refugee camp and start to understand the food situation. Well, they don't have any money, but they're given this food, and they've got to ground it into flour. So it's kind of one of these deals. You get 2 handfuls, and you're giving one away, in essence, so that you can have the 1 handful because you don't have the means to have that ground for yourself. So it's those things, too, that are working.
And then, just like here in the United States, the way that over the years that we've done the Native Americans, and they're on the worst land around, that's where the refugee camps are. Very little water, very poor for growing any crops of any sort, and so it just highlighted a lot. And in the government is good enough to allow the land, to allow these places. It is safer there than it is to be at home in South Sudan right now. It's still a very tough situation. A lot of the local Ugandans on the ground don't want them there. And if you drive into the refugee camps, it's huge geographically, but there's a lot of those areas where they've burned off. And what I was told, I don't know if you heard this or not, what I was told, that's the local folk burning off the grass so that the refugees can't have it to build their huts. If they go to try to cut wood for the poles to build a structure, they get run off. So they're left to try to figure out how to get some money somewhere so that they can buy a pole. But in the midst of all of that, the pastors that are there in the refugee camps that have come out, the ones that we've been working with in South Sudan, have started 6 churches in the refugee camp. The Sunday that we were there worshiping in one of them about 3 weeks ago, 3 people joined the church that Sunday and wanted to be part of what was going on. And so there's joy, and there's hope, there's life, in the midst of a difficult situation.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that presentation by Tom and others. Now, I want to cue you in on things. Next week is going to be annual conference, and I'm going to be doing some special broadcasts for the call, in addition to hopefully sitting down with some of you and getting some interviews down so that I can use them later in the year. But I'm going to put up a special broadcast tomorrow. Normally it's every Wednesday. I'm going to go ahead and put up the second report that I took out of the meeting on February the 14th of this year. It's from the African American Witness Team, our African American Task Force, and I will invite you to listen in tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to hear that report. Listen back to the channel. I may be doing some live reports from annual conference, or maybe doing some very short ones. I don't know. I'm waiting to see what the feel for conference is in terms of getting people to talk to me and so forth, but I hope to have quite a few podcasts that come out of conversations at annual conference. Hey, that might be a good series, Conversations at Annual Conference. I don't know. I'll just have to see. But I invite you to come back often to the Wesleyan Connection podcast, and also make sure you check out the Call podcast, which I do for our conference newspaper. God bless. Have a great day. And as they say, I hope to see you at annual conference. This is Pastor Goodman. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Wesleyan Connection. Be sure to check back often for more podcasts.